rotate a figure or point 180 degrees about the origin. So we're going to be talking about clockwise rotations and counterclockwise rotations. We can see that our first problem today, if we read very carefully, tells us that we're going to rotate it 180 degrees about the origin in a clockwise fashion. So remember, 90 degrees is a turn, is like a 90-degree turn. 180 degrees is 90 degrees and then 90 degrees again. So basically it's coming all the way around. So I'm going to start by turning this one clockwise. That's 90 degrees, and so I need to move one more. This is 180 degrees, and this is going to tell me where my new points are, which I probably should have wrote down my old points to begin with. We'll come back to that. All right, so I can see that my A prime now looks like it's at -2. This is where it's really helpful to learn to write upside down. +1. My B prime turned around is at -3. Positive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My upside down handwriting is not great. And my C prime looks like it is at -5. That's the one number I can never do upside down. And +2. So now I can flip it all the way back around. I'll go ahead and write my coordinates of my original. My original coordinates, A is 2, -1. My B is 3, -6. And my B is... My C is 5, -2. Thank you. All right. So at this point, let's go ahead and graph them really quickly to make sure, or graph the new points so we know what that should look like. This is -2, 1. That was my A prime. My B prime is -3, +6. B prime, and my C prime is -5, 2. This is my C prime. All right, so we can see that we have the same figure. It's just been basically turned all the way around that axis. Now, at this point, you should be able to come up with a rule looking at our sets of points for what happens to our coordinates, x and y, as it is rotated 180 degrees clockwise. So take 15 seconds to explore that on your own. Make sure you've got in your head what that rule should look like. Remember that when we write our rule like this negative doesn't mean that it's becoming negative. That means that it's switching signs. It's going to be the opposite of whatever it was before. So we can see here that our y... Sorry. Jacob, what were you about to correct me on?
It's the same, x and y.
Yeah, x and y are actually not switched. So fix that on your paper. So x, do not switch places. And Edgar did not say that. I just wasn't listening very well. Ganas to Jacob and Ganas to Edgar for having it right the first time. So the x's and y's don't switch, but they both switch signs. So when we start to think about all of the rules that we have so far, and we go back to rotation of 90 degrees clockwise, we're like, okay, rotation of 90 degrees clockwise, we're going to switch the x and y. The x is going to switch signs as it moves over to the y place. If we rotate it counterclockwise, then our rule is that we need to switch the x and y, and as the y switches to the x place, it's going to become negative. And our rotation of 180 degrees clockwise, we can see they don't switch, but they both switch signs. And then when it's reflecting, if it's over the x-axis, we're switching the... Kip yes or kip no. Is memorizing these rules going to be particularly effective? Not really. You have to have some way to remind yourself or to recreate the rule. So, no, memorizing is not going to be effective. Just because the rules are so many and they're so similar. Memorizing, not effective. So remember, it's all about being able to create an opportunity for you to remind yourself to quickly recreate the rule. And we're going to do that in a minute. But first we're going to focus on this next one, which is a rotation of 180 degrees counterclockwise. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to rotate it now counterclockwise. Notice I'm turning it to the left now. This is a 90-degree turn and 90 degrees more. I can see that my points are now -2, 1. My B is -3, 6. And my C is negative, I'm going to try the 5. -5, +2. And so now I rotate this all the way back around. We started with the same points. 2, -1. 3, -6. 5, -2. Sorry, that 3 is really sloppy. All right, -3, -6. So, what is our rule when we are rotating counterclockwise? Our x and our y do not switch, but they both switch signs. So we can see that 180-degree rotation is exactly the same either way, and that makes sense because it doesn't matter whether I turn around this way or I turn around this way, I'm still facing the same direction, the exact same thing. Doesn't really matter. If I turn 180 degrees to my right or I turn 180 degrees to my left, I'm still facing the exact same way. And that makes sense, that these rules are not different. How is this rule different? It's not. Now, are our rules different when we have 90-degree turns? Yes. All right, so we have to keep that in mind. And that makes sense because if I turn left, I'm facing Jaquan. If I turn right, I'm facing John. And that makes a huge difference. If I'm not turning at all, then I'm facing Sammy. If I make a 180-degree turn, I'm facing Mason. Glad we're all on the same page here. All right, so remember, the aim for today is being able to use this rule, but you also have to be able to create this rule because there's no way that you're going to keep all of the rules in this unit straight if you try and just memorize it as like straight up rules. So what you're going to do is you're going to pick a point. You know me, I like 1/8 or -1/8. So I'm going to use the point 1/8. And it tells me that I want to know the rule for clockwise rotation of 180 degrees. So I'm just going to take it and I'm going to rotate it clockwise 180 degrees. That's 90. That's 180. And I can see my point would now be at -1, -8. -1, -8. And that should be a quick reminder that my rule is if I have x, y, it stays x and y in the same place and they just become negative. And this is something that you can do with a sketch really easily. You don't have to have a coordinate grid to remind yourself of what the rule is. You can do it with a sketch on your paper really easily. All right? Juan.
The rule is if X or Y is negative or positive, you change it to the opposite sign.
Switches signs, absolutely. Remember that when we write the rules like this, with this negative in the rule, that really just means that it's switching signs. So, do me a favor, and this is really a check on your work from yesterday, or not yesterday, on Thursday. I want you to remind yourself of what the rule is for a clockwise rotation of 90 degrees. So what you need to do, plot a point to a clockwise rotation 90 degrees, so you can remind yourself of what the rule is for that. Clockwise rotation of 90 degrees.